You don't need I'm doing this my way.
He a legend, he a legend, he a legend. He a legend, he a legend, he a legend. He a legend. Welcome to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league of items. Welcome to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league of items.
What's up, everybody? It's Pikel with League of Items, and today we're going to take a quick look at, well, I guess maybe not a quick look, at Week 1, review some of the games, talk about Cloud9, the Church of C9, LS and his interesting drafting style. One thing that I wanted to get out of the way early is that a lot of the ideas that LS is incorporating into Cloud9 right now, they're not new ideas. These ideas have been around for many years. I have videos on my channel dating back 5 years about itemization and things like that. And this isn't an attempt to take any credit for what LS is doing. It's just that it's not a completely unique idea or approach to League of Legends. The problem that there's been so far getting this type of game, this type of drafting into professional play is the gatekeeping of professional players. And players who are good at the game understand the game to a decent level, but at a certain point, they don't want to listen to anybody anymore. They want to say, oh, well, this feels good. You know, I like doing it this way. And what that's called is cognitive dissonance. And I'm not going to go into this gigantic spiel again, but basically, it's you're challenging their worldview, you're challenging their opinions on things, and you need to have a ridiculous amount of information to persuade them. And for some people, numbers aren't enough. It's very obvious which items are good and which items are not good. The question becomes, how do we put these items into practice? Which champions can use these items? Are these champions good enough with these items to compete at the professional level? And when it fails one time or two times, people just want to stop playing it immediately. But over time, if you're continuously building correctly and drafting correctly, you're going to gain an advantage. So then the question changes once again. What does it mean to draft correctly? What does it mean to pick correctly? There are multiple ways to do it, and unfortunately, I think that LS's like quote unquote system has become dogmatic because it is only taking. Well, I mean, and maybe this isn't fair because the draft today kind of shows a blend. The people who espouse LS's beliefs, not LS himself, they don't fully understand what LS is trying to do. I feel like I can say that with almost absolute certainty because they just know what LS says is good and what's bad. They don't necessarily understand why he thinks things are good or bad. You can always play towards that type of win condition. It's not the only win condition in League of Legends, but if your team is clearly playing this style of the League of Legends and the other team is not or doesn't know what's going on or why you're making the decisions that you're making, it becomes more difficult for them to play the game and develop answers to Cloud9. This almost inspires me to go back and do some more of this analysis so I can post like a video about how I would approach beating Cloud9 or what items I would expect them to go after and potential ways to either counter it or match it, because they might just be playing a different game than everyone else right now, which isn't necessarily a good thing and it may not be good enough at a certain point against certain level of teams. And then lastly, I guess the last thing I would say about Cloud9, one very interesting thing that Fudge said at the end of his interview today was that he had not played a game of Soraka in 2 years. And the reason I think this is interesting is because this might be the perfect way to get someone like Fudge into the mid lane and get him up to speed in terms of being competitive. Because if he is not going to be as good at the different matchups that are out there right now as a mid laner because he is not used to playing mid lane champions, by throwing this curveball of unique champions in the mid lane and a unique playstyle, it will force other teams to adapt how they're playing. So it's just like almost an accidental way of gaining an advantage in the draft. So let's take a look at the results from today. I had the favorites and Golden Guardians. I'm pretty sure those were my picks. The favorites and Golden Guardians. Yeah. So I had Evil Geniuses over Cloud9, that lost. I had TSM over Dignitas, that lost. I had 100 Thieves over CLG, that won. I had the FlyQuest against Golden Guardians. Golden Guardians had a gigantic lead in that game and threw it away. And then in the last game, Team Liquid won. But let's take a look at this. So in this draft, when I was watching this, I really did think that it was very smart, a very smart approach to draft. So good job, Cloud9, for throwing a curveball. Where is... Okay. So Thresh is one of the best champions in League of Legends right now. That has a lot to do with... Thresh is one of the best champions to pick in pro play because of the importance of hard carry champions like Aphelios, like Jinx. Thresh's win rate is in the 60s, I think, across the 4 major regions, which is very good. Responding with Jinx and Xin Zhao is pretty smart. I think that picking Jinx right away shows that they have an idea of what they want to do against Cloud9 if they're going to play an enchanter in the mid lane, because one of the limitations of the draft from yesterday was I think they picked Jhin, and you're just going to get outscaled even harder in that scenario. But then this is where Cloud9 threw their own curveball. So they drafted Olaf, which is not the kind of champion you would expect LS to want, because it's a very strong early game champion and it will fall off in the late game. And it's early enough in the draft where Evil Geniuses should have approached it differently and probably should not have finished off the draft the way that they did. But then they grab Aphelios, so trading Aphelios for Jinx, I'm fine doing that in like almost every game. I know that Aphelios has been winning more often in the past couple of days, but that's just noise. In reality, it's just a pretty fair trade, I think, and it will come down to the rest of the map. Evil Geniuses responds with a Leona pick. I'm not 100% convinced that I like the Leona pick. I don't have any statistics to back that up. And I get that they want hard engage, which allows them more flexibility for their other 2 picks, which is fine. I just don't think that I would pick the Leona. I know that it's another feel-good champion. People want to pick stuff like Leona. So then the bans come through again. Evil Geniuses bans Lulu and Ivern. Those were in response to Cloud9, their game from yesterday. The types of champions they want to play in the mid lane are going to utilize items really well, and they're going to have better economy in the sense that their items are cheaper, but the items value, the amount of gold that the gold value of those items is much more than what you would think based off of its cost. And that's where gold efficiency comes in, because you're spending gold for stats. And then some items have like a 1-to-1 value where you spend 2,400 gold, you get roughly 2,400 gold of value. But a lot of the support items, specifically enchanter items, have conditions where you can have 2x or 3x based on how well you're utilizing the shielding and stuff like that. So let's just get the rest of the draft on the screen. Whoops. All right. So this is when the draft is basically finished. So Evil Geniuses picks Victor. And I am not a fan of Victor. Victor has an under 50% win rate. Victor is thought of as a good blind pick champion. But if you look across the LCS and the LEC and you look at the games where Victor is played, he's really just a win more champion. He has limited range. He has good wave clear. But he's not going to pump out sustained damage. And that's one of the things that surprised me when Azale said it on the cast. He said that Victor has good sustained damage. I really don't think that's true. Victor is really more of a burst mage with wave clear. I'd be interested to see what the numbers say about that, about how often he's doing damage and how much damage he's doing. Like, just because you have high DPS doesn't mean that you are sustained damage. Like, if you do, theoretically, 2,000 damage 1 second and then 0 for 4 seconds, you're still going to be 400 damage per second. If you're someone like Aphelios and you're pumping out 400 damage each second, there's more opportunities for you to do damage, and your abilities are not on cooldown. That they're just different. You know what I mean? One of those is less susceptible to the healing, because you're going to be able to, like, after your first rotation, you're going to continuously do damage, whereas you need to wait another 4 or 5, like 3 or 4 seconds for the Victor to finish his second rotation of spells to bring that DPS back up to a level that will get through the healing. The other thing that you have to ask is if, and again, this is why let me just get my face back up on the screen. This might be a reason why the draft was also smart from actually, it's kind of in the way, from C9, is because they waited to lock in their enchanter until they knew what the mid laner was going to be. So we had a Victor. So Victor's low range makes it more difficult to get the poke damage in. That's going. It's not necessarily going to stick, but it's going to cause Soraka to continuously use her going to cause her to use her abilities. And also Victor against Aphelios. I really don't think that you want to play Victor against Aphelios, because you have to be within his range in order to really do a decent amount of damage. So C9 went with the Soraka. They got Camille. So you have Aphelios and Camille, who are two very good scaling champions. You have Olaf, who's going to fall off of a cliff. You have Soraka, who's going to help supplement the Olaf and then also give a lot of advantages to the Aphelios and the Camille. And then EG responded with Tryndamere. And I don't really think that Tryndamere was a good option for the 5v5, because that's just really not what Tryndamere is. And it's another champion that is kind of just running in to a range that's going to get blown up by the Aphelios if he gets fed. I don't know. I think that there needs to be more analysis done on how to beat the C9 comps, but you can't also lose sight of what else is strong. So like things like Aphelios are strong and the C9 comps are strong. The overlapping portion of that is hyper carries with enchanters mid that get the itemization that allows a champion like Aphelios to do a ridiculous amount of damage. So let's take a look at what the itemization looked like. I just wanted to do the draft in order because I wasn't 100% sure what it was. But then you get into the game and you get Ardent Censer, Moonstone Renewer, and a Redemption. Actually, I needed that. I want to show that first team fight. All right. So I think I'm pretty sure this is it. So at this, I mean, is this what it was? Yeah. So this isn't really as bad as I thought it was going to be. This wasn't itemization. This is just playing around Soraka's ultimate. I think they're making way too much out of this on on the broadcast they were trying to make it sound like, oh, you can't fight these early objectives against Cloud9, but this is a time that you can fight them if you have the right types of champions. Having Danny's not going to be very helpful. Something like Xin Zhao against Olaf specifically is probably fine. The Xin Zhao was stronger at that point as well. That was just an execution mistake, and it's funny because they will always assume that good teams are executing correctly, and that bad teams are not executing correctly, which they're going to be right most of the time. But this is just not based off of draft or anything. This is just execution. Did they have a ward on it the entire time? No. Yes? Yeah, they had a ward on it the entire time. So they had to lead in the top lane, but they don't have teleport. Olaf is making a move down to Dragon right now. So they have vision on this. But Xin Zhao is on Krug, so he can't really do anything yet. So Jojo Pyun had to move earlier. Like right now he's still in the mid wave. If they were going to contest this, Jojo Pyun had to move faster. Because Soraka doesn't need to leave lane to impact the fight. I mean, I don't want to go... Actually, let's go a little further. So let's see what the first item... Moonstone Renewer. So Moonstone Renewer, you're getting good value on three of the champions. And the game was so close. Like, in this spot... Evil Geniuses probably should have just played more aggressive. Yeah, so. This was just a misplay by Danny. That was just a mistake by Danny. But I mean, good out of Berserker. Like, I'm not trying to take any credit away from C9. That's the tough thing about talking about these kinds of games, is that it's so polarizing already. Like, the conversation surrounding it is so polarizing that people assume that you're either 100% in or you're 100% out. But like, obviously, I like Evil Geniuses. I want Evil Geniuses to be successful against a team like Cloud9. There were a lot of questions around how good can their team be with these new players and a new play style. It's obvious that there's a few things that are obvious. One thing that's obvious is that these players are talented, but not necessarily more or less talented than Evil Geniuses. The second thing is that the play style that LS is trying to get these players to opt into can work. And I think that's the one thing a lot of teams have been reluctant to try or admit, is that there are more ways to play the game. There are more ways to draft. And all that it really does is gives credence to all of the people who've been complaining about this for so long. So I hope that teams can kind of establish their own identities a little better moving forward, because some of these teams just do... they just have like... They use the excuse of like, oh, well, everyone else drafts this way, and then they draft that way, and then they suck at it, and they lose, and they don't want to get flamed because it's like, oh, well, we're playing the good stuff. It's just, the other team is better than us. Well, then find new champions to play. So first up, let's go over the 100 Thieves against the CLG game. In my Discord, I said I don't have the words to describe how bad Contracts played in this game, and I'm not even going to try to find the words now. This kind of draft from 100 Thieves is so exploitable. If they drafted like this against C9 and C9 was playing the CLG composition or Evil Geniuses were playing the CLG composition, they would win the game. And it's because Twisted Fate is a limited champion. Yes, Twisted Fate has a good win rate around the world because it can punish teams in the early game, but CLG should have been stronger than 100 Thieves in the early portion of the game. Contracts runs mid lane, tries to gank mid, and burns his ultimate for TF's flash, but then also has to flash out. So it was just a complete waste. He didn't need to play it the way that he did either. It was just really bad out of Contracts, and that's back-to-back horrible performances from Contracts. And I am negative sometimes about players in like a joking way. Contracts is just playing so bad right now. That Trundle performance yesterday was horrible. Yes, it was difficult because they were playing FlyQuest was playing a different style that people aren't used to. But then this game, there's no excuse for this kind of performance from Contracts. And that's, I don't know where you go from here. It's 2 games in to this roster, and you're already saying to yourself, well, maybe we need to get rid of Contracts. I'm not saying that they are saying that, and I think that would be a hasty decision, but this was just so bad. Game 2, Dignitas against TSM. I'm starting to think that Graves is kind of a trap. I've already been saying that Poppy's a trap. I think that Zeri is probably a trap. I know that Victor's a trap. So it's funny, like a lot of these champions, again, teams can say, well, everybody else is playing it. They're good champions, but they're good for specific reasons. And the Poppy against Gwen and Jarvan, I understand why you might want to pick it, but you're limiting arguably the best player on your team. Poppy is not the kind of champion that can hard carry a game. Why would you take your jungler, who was the MVP, why would you put him onto Poppy? I just don't understand that aspect of it. When other teams do it, like when T1 does it, or let's just talk about T1. When T1 does it, they're taking a player who is not the primary carry of their team. They put them onto Poppy because it's good in the draft, and they just want to have those like slight advantages in specific scenarios, and they know that owner is good at the champion. And I'm sure that Spica is fine at the champion, but it's different because TSM needs Spica to create more in the early game and be more impactful throughout the game. And should also be playing a champion that can carry the game. I think it's a mistake. Cloud9 against Evil Geniuses, we already talked about that. This game was very close. Cloud9 did not win the game in the draft, but they did play around their draft really well. Olaf is one of Blabber's best champions. If you can have Olaf scaling AD carry, scaling top laner, enchanter mid, and get to like the 25-minute mark within 2,000 gold of a deficit, you're probably within 2,000 gold of gold earned. You're probably winning that game still, because at that point in time, Soraka will most likely have 2 or 3 items, and is going to make up for that gold deficit. And that's really what teams don't understand yet. And there is time for these teams to adopt some of this playstyle for themselves, because that's really what's happening, is that if you spend your gold more efficiently than the enemy team, then the gold earned lead and the gold statistics that you see on the screen are not irrelevant, but they're just not giving an accurate representation of what's going on in the game. And then the last game, was this last game? No, TL and Immortals was. FlyQuest against Golden Guardians. So Golden Guardians were winning this game, I think, for most of the game, and then FlyQuest just like won back-to-back team fights and ended the game. I'm pretty sure that's what it sounded like. And again, they have adopted this similar kind of playstyle where you're getting multiple enchanter items. Ardent Sensor and Moonstone Renewer, both very good. It all depends on your team composition, which support items you want to get, but those support items are going to give your team a lot of additional value while they're active. And that's one of the reasons why Lux is actually a very good champion with auto attack champions, is because you can get your shield onto a bunch of players and almost have 100% uptime once you get closer to the CDR cap. So interesting from FlyQuest that this is kind of the playstyle that they've chosen to use. I don't think it's going to be as successful against the better teams. And that's because even though the playstyle is fine, it requires high levels of execution. And they should have lost this game. I think that's really the thing that you need to keep in mind, is that they should have lost this game. And then the last game was Team Liquid against Immortals. I don't have any information on that one. And that's really it. So that's all I have. I might review some of this stuff closer throughout the week. On the 9th, I think the LCK comes back, and then a few days later, I think the LPL comes back. So it'll be nice to have all 4 major regions in the middle of their spring season at the same time. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe. I'm at 999 followers on Twitter, and I'm at like 900 something on YouTube. I'd like to get both of those to 1,000 before the end of the spring split. So we'll see how that goes. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.